Hey everyone, it's Ryder from Skip. I hope you're doing well. It's Monday, July 5th. Important video today on how $28.6 billion was quickly spent and how both the design and the process of the program left potentially 500,000 businesses without any funding. These are some of your businesses we all know, specifically for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, otherwise known as the RRF, which has officially closed, and we are the first folks to do an in-depth analysis of what went wrong, who received funding, and most importantly, how were so many people left out of critical funding. Even if you aren't a restaurant or food and beverage business, watch this video until the end. It has implications for all government relief programs, including the EIDL grants and loans. I'll specifically talk about why, but this $28.6 billion has major implications, and of course, chances are there are restaurants in your town or city that you've been to that are massively impacted by what happened here. This is one of the most in-depth videos we've done. If you want to support our research and our effort, we've done more research here than many major news outlets, from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times, and the SBA has said to us they appreciate a lot of the in-depth data analysis we do. If you appreciate that, please hit subscribe. We've had 5 million people watching this channel over the last year, and the vast majority of them haven't hit subscribe yet. So if you do one thing today, hit subscribe, give this video a like so we can get the word out about the importance of this, because again, this has implications for every single relief program that's existing and any potential new relief programs that come down from Congress. Here is the announcement from last week. SBA Administrator Isabel Guzman announced the closure of the RRF. Here's the data. As of June 30th, the RRF program received more than 278,000 submitted eligible applications, representing over $72 billion in requested funds. And approximately 101,000 applicants were funded. Who were those businesses? We've done the first RRF recipient lookup. You can go to helloskip.com/RRF-data. You can look up any RRF recipient by name, by location, check all the businesses near you who received this funding. This is similar to our EIDL loan and grant lookup and our PPP lookup, which are the most used EIDL and PPP lookups in the country. We've just put this up, RRF recipients. You can type in any recipient you want. For example, we just put in San Francisco here, and you can scroll down and see every single restaurant business that received these grants. San Francisco Soup Company, almost $10 million. Urban Putt, San Francisco, almost $3 million. San Francisco CNC, this is the company for Mel's Diners, received $10 million. I'm going to loop back to these in a minute, but let me get back to the press release, okay? $28.6 billion. Let me put this in context. Last year, there was $20 billion set aside for EIDL advances as part of the CARES Act. That $20 billion provided advances to over 5 million businesses. Yes, they were substantially smaller, between $1,000 and $10,000 grants. The magnitudes of these RRF grants are in most cases 10x or 100x what the EIDL grants are. So think about that for a second. Many of you watching this channel for 10K targeted grants or the additional 5K supplemental to get the full 15K. Meanwhile, 100,000 restaurants across the country received an average grant of nearly $300,000. Okay, $283,000 was the average grant award. We've graphed out all of these. The main point here is these grants are 30 times what targeted EIDL grants are. And we know the restaurant industry was one of the hardest hit. So was the venue industry, hence the shuttered venue operators grants. But many other industries suffered drastically as well. You had your shops close because of lockdown orders across the country. Yet Congress only did 2 special funding programs, both for restaurants and shuttered venue operators, and only 35% of people who applied for the RRF received some funding, so 2/3 were left out, and many didn't even apply because they knew, based on the rules of the program, funding would be used up before their application was reviewed. So we've heard from many of you that you didn't even apply for the RRF because you knew you didn't have a shot. So here is the takeaway we put up on our blog. This is just up on our app today, Hello Skip, in the App Store and Google Play. 2/3 of RRF eligible applicants received 0 funding. Yes, to the SBA's credit, which by the way only administers the program, they did not write the law, which is the biggest issue. The SBA did lots of outreach ahead of time via webinars, community partners, social media. We even did a step-by-step guide to applying, so you knew exactly what to do on the go live date, what to prepare ahead of time, how to upload documents to the SBA RRF portal and apply successfully. Despite this effort, there were 2 primary problems. Number 1, and this is what got attention a couple weeks ago, thousands of approved restaurant owners had their funding rescinded. This was the first major blow. There were lawsuits challenging the application priority period. This was the 21 days where women-owned minority-owned, and other socially and economically disadvantaged groups received priority in their review. Due to legal challenges, here's what happened. The SBA alerted 2,965 female and disadvantaged applicants via letter that they would not be getting their grants, even though they'd been informed earlier that they'd been approved and would soon be receiving the funds. Most of these businesses ended up receiving nothing. Gail posted this yesterday. She said, "We were approved women-owned business for $254,000 on May 18th. Last week, we were informed we will not be receiving our grant because of the legal suits brought in Tennessee and Texas." Imagine that. But that is just a symptom of the real problem, which is how this program was designed and written into law. So if we go back to our lookup here, let's take a look at San Francisco Soup Company. This is the San Francisco Soup Company's website. I think they have a couple locations because the limit was $5 million per location, so they have at least 2 locations because they got just under $10 million. Meanwhile, Urban Putt, San Francisco LLC, this is Urban Putt. It's so people in San Francisco can do miniature golf, maybe order drinks and some food as well. That's how they qualified, because any establishment that had a certain percentage of sales in food and drink could qualify for the RRF. So Urban Putt got nearly $3 million for their one location. So Urban Putt was one of 4,600 businesses that received between $1 million and $5 million right here. And there were only 300 businesses that received between $5 million and $10 million. SF Soup being one of those, the other example in San Francisco. Take a look at this discrepancy here. The 3 takeaways here are this: 45% of businesses funded through the RRF received less than $100,000, accounting for 8% of total funding. So about half of businesses accounted for 10% of total funding. 2/3 of businesses received less than $200,000, accounting for 20% of total funding. And the big one, 5% of businesses funded received over $1 million, accounting for 37% of total funding. So how did this happen? How did so many small businesses get massive amounts when hundreds of thousands of businesses were left out? Here's the law as it was written. For the RF, the grant shall not exceed $10 million, shall be limited to $5 million per physical location, and the determination of the grant amount in general shall be equal to the pandemic-related revenue loss of the eligible entity. So 2019 revenue minus 2020 revenue, that's your RRF grant amount. If Urban Putt made $10 million in 2019 and last year they made $5 million, and let's say they got 2 PPP draws, okay, for $1 million each, so that leaves $3 million left that hasn't been covered. So in their RRF grant, they would get around $3 million. Basically, any revenue gap between 2019 and 2020 was covered in grants, not loans. And we know that most businesses let go of their employees so they could apply for unemployment and get other benefits. Other businesses also received EIDL funding and other federal, state, and city grant and loan programs to help them survive this last year and a half. But this is fundamentally what happened. In the grand scheme of things, a small number of businesses being helped, and some businesses with more revenue getting a lot more money, leaving hundreds of thousands of restaurants with zero funding. And we know for many of you with the EIDL program, you are experiencing the same exact thing with the targeted and supplemental grants. So just between the RRF and the EIDL grants alone, that's $60 billion in new relief funding. And here's the question we posed: was the congressional intent to help as many restaurants as possible weather the storm? Or was it to help only a fraction of restaurants get funding? Assuming the former, to help as many restaurants as possible, they could have done many things differently. That's why every word in legislation matters so much. 2 examples before we wrap this video. If there was a $1 million cap for the RRF grant program, 50% more businesses could have been funded. If you had that 1 million cap and people received half of the grant amount, so let's say the lost revenue was only funded at 50% of lost revenue, 300% more businesses could have been funded. Here's the exact number: 316,000 more businesses if there was a 1 million cap in grants and the legislation said we're going to give you half of your revenue loss between 2019 and 2020. Imagine that. You can do the math, so on and so forth. We crunched the numbers. You know, if there was a $50,000 grant limit, nearly 600,000 restaurants, food and beverage businesses would have been able to be helped. That's 500,000 more than were currently helped. If you want to read all of the numbers we crunched here, this is on our app and the Skip blog. I'll leave all the links right below, including to our RRF recipient lookup, but the main takeaway here is this. Look, Congress is still talking about whether or not to provide more relief funding for small businesses, whether industry specific or not. But the original intent to help restaurants, one of the hardest hit areas since the pandemic, was good. but in implementation, it completely failed by leaving out more people than it helped. And it's something to keep in mind in the next iteration of any relief funding, to put in caps to make sure that enough people are helped to make a difference. Yes, 100,000 restaurants are helped, and you can look up restaurants near you to see this for yourself, but many more restaurants across the country were left out, and because of that, they may stay temporarily closed or shut forever. Before you go, a quick favor to ask. If you were a restaurant who received funding for the RRF, we'd love to hear in the comments, and would you have taken a lesser amount if you knew it could help other small businesses, restaurants near you? Or if you were a restaurant that was shut out of the RRF, we'd also love to hear. And if you think, as a small business owner or independent contractor, would you rather see more equitable distribution if it means taking lower amounts? What's your perspective? Would you have designed the program differently? I would love to hear in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this important video and joining our community by hitting subscribe and liking this video. Most importantly, stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you tomorrow.